During a snow blizzard on Palm Sunday 1461, the biggest, longest and probably bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil took place near Towton in Yorkshire. The battle was fought during the Wars of the Roses, the dynastic feud that split the ruling royal house of Plantagenet between two rival factions, the Lancastrians and the Yorkists. Estimates suggest that over 50,000 Englishmen fought on this day at Towton, and that 28,000 were killed. It resulted in a crushing victory for the Yorkists and enabled their leader to be crowned King Edward IV of England. This is the story of that gigantic, bloody battle, the Battle of Towton in 1461. The Wars of the Roses was a dispute between the descendants of King Edward III as to who should sit on the throne of England. As I have produced a separate video going into the background of the Wars of the Roses, I'm just going to give you a real whistle-stop tour as to that background now before we go on to the battle. The two rival factions were descended from three of Edward III's sons, including the Duke of Lancaster and the Duke of York. And they were represented by their heraldic, each by a heraldic rose. The white rose of York and the red rose of Lancaster, hence the name the Wars of the Roses. By 1455, that rivalry had descended into a civil war between the leader of the Lancastrians, King Henry VI, and Richard of York. For the next 5 years, the civil war bubbled away, and then just before New Year's Eve in 1460, Richard of York was killed as the Lancastrians achieved a major victory at the Battle of Wakefield. Richard's head was actually stuck on a pole on the city walls of York. The House of Lancaster, under King Henry VI and his formidable wife, Margaret of Anjou, were on top. And they followed up with another victory down south at the Second Battle of St Albans on the 17th of February 1461, when York's ally, the Earl of Warwick, was defeated and he had to flee behind the city walls of London. Now the leader of the Yorkist cause was Richard of York's 18-year-old son, Edward, Earl of March. He had immediately proven his willingness to continue the fight by defeating Owain and Jasper Tudor's Lancastrian army at the Battle of Mortimer's Cross over in Herefordshire. Unable to enter London, who had defiantly locked their gates against them, Henry VI and Margaret had to retreat north to York. And meanwhile, young Edward, Earl of March, had arrived in London to a hero's welcome, and on the 4th of March, the people of London proclaimed him king. There was still this tiny problem, the fact that England already had a king, King Henry. He was anointed and crowned, and not to mention the fact, of course, he had his lioness of a wife, Margaret of Anjou. Edward said that he would refuse to be crowned until Henry and Margaret were removed from the picture. Now, the blockbuster Game of Thrones series was inspired by the Wars of the Roses. So in true Game of Thrones tradition, when Edward said he wanted Henry and Margaret out of the scene, this wasn't going to end nicely. If Edward wanted the crown of England and to remove Henry VI, then he was going to have to go north to sort it out. And so Edward, along with Warwick and an army of over 20,000, left London and marched north towards Yorkshire. In response, Henry, Margaret of Anjou, gathered a huge Lancastrian force in Yorkshire, somewhat bizarrely, the Lancastrians gathering in Yorkshire and the Yorkists coming from London. Hey, civil wars. In size, it matched and probably outnumbered Edward's army. Advancing north, Edward reached the town of Pontefract, about 40 miles from York, in late March. From there, he sent Lord Fitzwalter, one of his commanders, to seize the bridge crossing the River Aire at Ferrybridge. Arriving on the south bank of the River Aire, they found that the Lancastrians had destroyed the bridge, preventing them marching on York. By the 27th of March, Fitzwalter had rebuilt the crossing, only for the Lancastrians to attack his force the following day. In the ensuing fight, Fitzwalter was killed, and Henry VI's troops once more demolished the bridge. The Lancastrians, under Lord Clifford, were unable to consolidate their position, as another Yorkist force, this time under Lord Falkenberg, a veteran of the 100 Years' Wars in France, had crossed the river 4 miles upstream and now attacked their flank. Clifford was killed and his men were forced to retreat. Edward and his army could now continue their advance on York. On the 29th of March 1461, Palm Sunday, 12 miles southwest of York, these two gigantic armies met at Towton. Something between 50 and 60,000 men, although some medieval chroniclers claim it was closer to 75,000 men. Whichever figure you want to accept, and most historians tend to go for that lower, 50 to 60,000. It was a huge number when you consider that the population of England at that time, based on some academic work published in 2011, was just under 2 million, compared to 55 million today. What that actually meant was that 1 in every 25 men in England was present on that field that day. Just put that for a moment into today's population figures. That would mean something like 1 million Englishmen turning up for a fight in a field in Yorkshire. It's quite extraordinary in many respects, just the size of this battle. And of course, by its very size, it had the potential to be a game changer. The Lancastrians moved to block Edward and under their commanders, Henry Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, who was cousin to Margaret Beaufort, the mother of a certain Henry Tudor, who you might have heard of, and Henry Percy, the Earl of Northumberland, drew up the Lancastrian forces on a rise south of the village of Towton, blocking the road to York. To the west, or effectively to the right of their position, was a steep incline down to a stream called the Cockbeck, which protected their right flank from attack, but at the same time meant that it hampered any retreat. Edward's outnumbered army, even more outnumbered as the Duke of Norfolk was struggling to keep up. He was nearly a day's march, or had been nearly a day's march behind with his reinforcements all the way from London, formed up on a lower rise to the south of the Lancastrian positions. So any attack that Edward launched would be uphill against superior numbers. Quite frankly, it didn't look good for him. As the two forces finished moving into position, a snow blizzard coming from the south descended on the battlefield. I say the wind from the south carried the snow straight into the faces of the Lancastrians. Edward's commander, the veteran Lord Falkenberg, ordered his archers to step forward and fire a volley of arrows into the Lancastrians, and then ordered them to retreat. Almost blinded by the snow, the visibility almost zero, the Lancastrian commanders assumed that the Yorkists were in range of their own arrows, and so they ordered their archers to release volley after volley until almost all their arrows had been used up. And then, as the snowstorm receded, they saw that the wind coming from the south had reduced the distance of their arrows, which were all formed up like a giant hedgehog in the ground in front of Edward's army. Edward's archers now rushed forward, and can you believe they picked up those very arrows from the soil and started to use them with deadly effect on their former owners. So now, with their men falling to a hail of arrows and very few arrows left themselves, the Lancastrians had no other choice but to cede the high ground and advance down towards the Yorkists to finish them off. Some sources at the time claimed that the fighting lasted 10 hours. It certainly lasted until dusk that day. When the archers got out of the way, it was really the mounted men-at-arms who then got into battle, dismounted their horses and were fighting on foot in their armour. Despite being outnumbered, the Yorkists had one advantage. They had their king very much in their midst. At 6'4", Edward was visible to his men as he rode along the line, urging them to hold firm. Quite frankly, if you wanted to die, you wanted to know that the man you were dying for was there with you in your midst. Meanwhile, where was the Lancastrian leader? Well, Henry VI was safely in York, 12 miles away. Nevertheless, despite having their leader very much in their midst, the Yorkists started to give way to the superior numbers of the Lancastrians, and they were getting pushed back. But just when Lancastrian victory was dawning, the Duke of Norfolk finally arrived with his reinforcements. Whether under Edward's orders or using his own tactical nous, Norfolk sent his men round to attack the Lancastrian left flank. And despite gallant resistance, the Lancastrian line started to break. Facing Norfolk's men coming from their left, Edward's men advancing in the centre, the Lancastrians were forced to retreat to their right, down the steep slopes towards the Cockbeck. Do you remember I said earlier, great for a defensive position, not good if you wanted to get out of the battlefield, and that's just what was happening to them now. The retreat rapidly became a rout. The field in front of the beck is to this day known as the Bloody Field. Witnesses say that actually the beck ran red with blood that washed out into the River Wharfe, and that you could actually cross from one bank to the other by standing on the dead bodies afterwards. The battle turned into a bloodbath. Whilst medieval chroniclers were not brilliantly accurate or consistent with their figures, it's generally agreed by most historians that something like 28,000 men died at the Battle of Towton, 2/3 of them from the Lancastrian army. 28,000 men out of a total male population of just under 1 million killed on Palm Sunday, 1461. During World War I, on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, the British lost 19,000 dead and a total casualty list of about 57,000. But that was from a population of 46 million total. The Battle of Towton cost 28,000 casualties from a population of just 2 million. It's regarded as the biggest in numbers, the longest in time, and by most historians, the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. Certainly no other battle during the Wars of the Roses came close, nor in the English Civil War. The Lancastrian army was shattered and would never again assemble in such numbers. Of the two Lancastrian commanders that day, Henry Percy, the Earl of Northumberland, fell in the battle. Henry Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, escaped. He raced from the battlefield to the city of York, where he gathered King Henry, Queen Margaret and the young Edward, Prince of Wales, their son, and then they rode as hard as they could the 150 miles to the Scottish border and safety. Henry and Margaret were now out of the way. Across the country, Lancastrian nobles and castles submitted to Edward. Well, all except one. Harlech Castle in Wales was to hold out for 7 years, Britain's longest known siege, and according to legend inspired the song Men of Harlech, famously sung in the film Zulu. Edward returned in triumph to London, and there on the 28th of June 1461 he was crowned King Edward IV at the age of just 19. The House of York were triumphant at last. But the Wars of the Roses had some more battles still to be fought. So, to hear about those battles and this major period in the history of England, please subscribe, turning on the bell notification when you do so you don't miss any of my future presentations. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you very, very soon.